Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 283 Brazil, and in the co-main event, we have Deiveson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno in a flyweight title unification bout, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this fight. I've already done a prediction video for the main event, Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill, and I have a bunch more UFC 283 prediction videos coming. I'll link the ones I already have done down in the description, but make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the UFC 283 prediction videos. So this fight between Figueiredo and Moreno is the first time we've had a quadrilogy in the UFC, nonetheless, for a title. And this was a fight that kind of almost didn't happen because after the trilogy fight, Deiveson Figueiredo was kind of saying, I want some new blood. I want to fight Kai Kara-France. I don't want to fight Moreno anymore. He doesn't deserve a title shot, this and that. And then supposedly he was injured. We never really got clarity on that. And Brandon Moreno ended up fighting Kai Kara-France at UFC 277, August of last year. Brandon Moreno ends up winning that fight. We'll talk about that fight in a second. But it's a fight that almost couldn't have happened because if Moreno loses to Kai Kara-France or Figgy's threatening to move up to bantamweight if the UFC wants to give Brandon Moreno another title shot. And it just seemed like it might not happen. And there was a lot of fans saying, we've already seen it 3 times and we don't even want to see it again, which I thought was totally crazy. But here we are. We're getting the quadrilogy. We're getting the 4th fight. And I am so excited for this matchup. No matter who wins this fight, it should be a fan-friendly, exciting matchup. And for me, I don't care how many times we watch these guys fight. I could watch them fight 20 times. They are the elite of the elite at flyweight. Every single fight they've had has been super exciting. And the 4th fight only made sense. They were 1-1-1. They had a draw, then Moreno won 1, and then Figgy won 1. So why would you not do the 4th fight? But this is a fight that's important for both guys because no matter how this ends, I don't foresee the UFC doing a 5th fight. I just don't see that. I don't think that's in the cards. So if one of these guys loses via a very close, controversial decision, I doubt we're getting a 5th title fight. So it comes down to this fight. They must win this fight. This is a must win for both guys. And for Figueiredo, he's getting up there in age. You know, age doesn't do very well in the lower weight classes. You can get away with that at light heavyweight or heavyweight. But being 35 years old in the flyweight division, it's not going to be easy as he only gets older, starts to slow down against these guys who are just lightning fast at flyweight. And if he loses to Moreno, what is he going to try to do? Build himself back up to another title shot? He's going to have to hope for another champion because, again, I don't think the UFC is going to do a 5th fight. And for Moreno, he's still young. He can still build his way back or hope for another champion or hope that Figgy moves up to 135 eventually, which he's alluded to. But still, for the foreseeable future, if he loses this fight, he's kind of going to be in that Max Holloway territory in a way where he's not fighting Figgy and he's not fighting for the belt, which Figgy has. And the UFC is not going to want to put him against contenders to then kill off and not be able to have those contenders then challenge Figgy for the belt. So it'll be a tricky spot. This is a must win for both guys. And it's a super exciting high-level matchup. This is my most anticipated fight on UFC 283. And the fact that some people were saying the 4th fight shouldn't happen, I just can't disagree with that enough. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Deiveson Figueiredo. He is 22-2-1. Brandon Moreno is 26-2. You have Figgy, who's the champion. Brandon Moreno is the interim champion. Figgy's 35. Moreno's 29. Figgy is 5'5". Moreno is 5'7". Figgy has a 68-inch reach, and Moreno has a 70-inch reach. So a 2-inch reach and 2-inch height advantage for Brandon Moreno and a 6-year youth advantage for Brandon Moreno. So if you look at Brandon Moreno, his last fight was at UFC 277, August of last year against Kai Kara-France. Kai Kara-France surging in the flyweight division. A lot of people wanted to see him fight for a title. Figgy was apparently injured. We never really got clarity on it, so they ended up doing an interim flyweight title fight at UFC 277. First and second round were competitive, but Moreno clearly won. The 3rd round is so interesting because that's where the stoppage happened. This was Kai Kara-France's best round up until the stoppage. He had busted Moreno up. He had got a takedown as Moreno was scrambling back to his feet, busted him up. His eye was leaking just under his eye. And it looked like the 3rd round was going to be Kai Kara-France's round. It was pretty clear. With like 30 seconds to go, Brandon Moreno kind of does a running step-in body kick. Just smashes the body of Kai Kara-France. and finishes him off with ground and pound. Amazing win for Brandon Moreno. And, the fights before that were all three of the fights versus Deiveson Figueiredo, which I'm going to get to after I talk about Figgy for a little bit. But one thing I find interesting about Brandon Moreno, he came into the UFC off the Ultimate Fighter. He lost to Sergio Pettis. Not a bad loss considering Sergio Pettis is the bantamweight champion in Bellator. And then he also lost to Alexandre Pantoja, who is literally the #1 contender. He should fight the winner of this fight. So again, not a bad loss again. He leaves, he gets a win outside the UFC. He comes back, he reels off a 3-fight win streak to get a title shot. He beat Brandon Royval back at UFC 255. The main event on that card was Figgy versus Alex Perez. They both got wins. The UFC needed a main event for UFC 256, which was a month later, and they both kind of had a short notice title fight. For Figgy, a title defense. For Moreno, obviously he's challenging for the belt. It ended up being a draw. I'll talk about those fights in a second. But to be cut from the UFC, get a win, come back, and eventually go on to become champion, that is straight up insanity. Another thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention off the top, Brandon Moreno, of his 20 wins, 4 by knockout, 11 by submission, 5 by decision. So even though you don't really think of it, the majority of Brandon Moreno's stoppage wins have been via submission. Of his 6 losses, all 6 of those are via decision. So if you look at Deiveson Figueiredo, his last 3 fights were against Brandon Moreno. We'll talk about them here in a second. He has 21 wins, 9 by knockout, 8 by submission, 4 by decision. Of his 2 losses, he's lost 1 via submission and 1 via decision. You look at his career. After Henry Cejudo vacated the belt, he defended against TJ Dillashaw, then he went up to the bantamweight division. After he vacated the belt, Deiveson Figueiredo was paired against Joseph Benavidez for the vacant flyweight title. And he went out there, smashed Joseph Benavidez, but he had missed weight. So they did a rematch, and then he goes out there, he smashes Joseph Benavidez yet again, wins the flyweight title. Then he defends against Alex Perez at UFC 255, which I think Alex Perez is a little bit underrated for the flyweight division. I think he's an elite level fighter. And I actually thought Alex Perez had a chance in this fight, but he just went out there and ends up getting a guillotine in the first round and makes it look easy in this fight. Unbelievable performance by Deiveson Figueiredo. And, you look back at his career, he has a win over Alexandre Pantoja, aged very well. He has a win over Tim Elliott. He has the 2 wins over Joseph Benavidez. The last loss in his career outside of Brandon Moreno was Jussier Formiga back in March of 2019. So, you're going years back to even find a loss outside of that Brandon Moreno loss at 263, which we'll talk about here in a second. And Jussier Formiga was a top-ranked guy at the time as well, and he lost that fight via unanimous decision. And Deiveson Figueiredo, after fighting Alex Perez, Figgy is a guy who cuts a decent amount of weight. He's a bigger guy than Brandon Moreno. He fought on November 21st of 2020. Again, Brandon Moreno fought on the same card, and they both got a win. Moreno got a win over Brandon Royval, and Figgy got the win over Alex Perez. They then fought at UFC 256, which was only 3 weeks later, December 12th of 2020. And, I know a lot of people say, well, it's short notice for both guys, and they were in shape because they just fought. Well, for Figgy, he has to cut weight. To make weight twice within a 3-week period for the bigger guy is substantial to take into account. And if you look at that fight at UFC 256, this was the draw. This was a fight that Deiveson Figueiredo would have won. He should have won 3 rounds to 2. But I believe it was the 3rd round, he kicked Brandon Moreno in the groin. And it was so impactful that Jason Herzog decided to take a point. So you take that round away because Figgy won that round. So now that round scored even. It's a 9-9 round. And then Moreno won 2 rounds. Figgy won 2 rounds. You get a majority draw in that fight. But that fight was amazing. Figgy came out in that fight because he fought differently in the other 2 fights, which we'll talk about here in a second. But in that fight, Figgy had no respect for Brandon Moreno. He just plodded forward. And I genuinely believe he thought he was going to brutally KO Brandon Moreno. And when he was still there in the 4th and 5th round, I think he was kind of shocked, to be honest, because he was showing absolutely no respect for Brandon Moreno. He was walking him down, hands low, slinging heavy shots, and he thought he was going to put him away. and inevitably he's not able to put him away. It goes to a close decision. It was a super competitive fight, one of the best fights of 2020. You had Joe Rogan in the 5th round because Brandon Moreno had a lump on his arm. I just went back and watched this fight recently. He had a lump on his arm. They're like, yeah, Brandon Moreno's arm's broken, which ended up not being true. It was just bruised from probably kicks of Deiveson Figueiredo. But a super close fight. They decide to book it for a rematch because it ended up being a draw. But it would not have been a draw without that point deduction. Then you go to UFC 263, which was June of 2021. And this was the most unexpected performance because Brandon Moreno went out there and put on a masterclass against Deiveson Figueiredo. In the first fight, Brandon Moreno had a good jab. Figgy had some good leg kicks, had a good jab as well, was throwing wild winging punches, landed some good ones. In the rematch, you know, it was rumored that Deiveson Figueiredo had a bad weight cut and he was dealing with the issues of that. And it looked like he was trying to conserve his energy. He was backing up for the majority of the fight. He was getting outstruck. He got dropped with a jab in the first round. And then eventually in the 3rd round, he gets taken down in a scramble almost immediately. Brandon Moreno takes his back, chokes him out via a rear naked choke. Masterful performance by Brandon Moreno. I honestly didn't think they would even do a trilogy fight after that because it was such a dominant win for Brandon Moreno. But there was it looming out there that Figgy was sick and Figgy had a bad weight cut. So they inevitably do the trilogy at UFC 270, which was January of last year at UFC 270. And this was a fight going into it. I basically picked every one of these fights wrong because I picked Figgy in the first fight, ended up being a draw. I picked Figgy in the second fight, ended up being Brandon Moreno's win. And then in the third fight, I picked Brandon Moreno and Figgy ultimately gets the decision. This third fight, you could see both guys making adjustments in this third fight. Figgy was chopping the legs. He was mixing in the grappling. He had trained with Henry Cejudo in this fight camp. And, you know, this was a very close fight. I scored it for Brandon Moreno, and I actually thought that you could give Brandon Moreno 2, 3, 4, and 5. But with that being said, I did not think it was a robbery. I think it was round 3 where Brandon Moreno clearly was winning the round, won like 4 minutes of the round, but Figgy dropped him at the end of that round. He could have stole that round. And then I think it was round 5 that was like razor close. And then I thought I had round 2 and 4 for Brandon Moreno. So this was a super close fight. Figgy kind of, you know, he mixed his approach from the first 2 fights because the first fight, he was just plotting forward, nonstop throwing power shots. The second fight, he was just backing up pretty much the whole time, throwing leg kicks. And in the third fight, he kind of mixed it very well. And he even mixed in some takedowns and was able to get Brandon Moreno down. And I think some of that positional control, some of that clinch position, some of those takedowns help him eke out some of those rounds in the judge's eyes and win him that fight. But it was a razor close fight. I would have gave it to Brandon Moreno, but nonetheless, it was not a robbery. And now these guys have fought 3 times, which is unbelievable because they know each other so well. And I'm wondering what kind of adjustments they're going to make in this 4th fight. For me, I really think that, you know, all bets are off. Pretty much this fight can end anyway. I think either guy could get a TKO here. I think either guy could get a submission. I think either guy could win a hard-fought decision. So nailing down a method of victory is really difficult. But my official prediction for this fight, I am going Brandon Moreno via 4th round TKO. I just think Brandon Moreno's younger. I think he has the crisper striking. I think Figgy has a power advantage, but it doesn't really matter because Brandon Moreno has such a good chin and he's so elusive. He does get hit a little bit, but his chin makes up for all of that. And it's not like he's taken a ridiculous amount of damage over the course of his career. And I think he'll eat those shots. I think he's going to make good adjustments. I think, you know, in that third fight, had he just been a little bit more active, thrown a little bit more volume, been a little bit more aggressive, I think he could have easily won that fight on the judges' scorecards. It was razor close. And you have the fact that Figgy's coming in this fight. He's 35 years old. He's no longer training with Henry Cejudo. Not that I believe, you know, there's some people that believe if you train with a certain fighter, all their strengths are then transferred to you. I don't believe in that. But you have that aspect as well. And I just think Figgy's getting older. He's getting slower. He's been off for basically a year at this point. His last fight was January 22nd. Meanwhile, Brandon Moreno's been active. And I just think Moreno gets this done. I think he's a little bit better wrestler. I don't think he's going to blow him out of the water with the wrestling. But I think in this fight, Deiveson Figueiredo's age is going to show. And I think Moreno has to address the leg kicks. And I think he has to move forward. When he moves forward on Deiveson Figueiredo, when he did in the previous fights, he had massive success. But the leg kicks, particularly in that third fight, but really in the first and third fight that Figgy was using, he was abusing Brandon Moreno's legs. And Moreno was kind of susceptible to that in the Kai Kara-France fight as well. Kara-France was landing some good leg kicks. If he can address those leg kicks, check those leg kicks, and continue to move forward, I think he has the head movement. I think he has the speed in his hands. And I think he will outbox Deiveson Figueiredo. I think he's going to mix in those body shots. I think he's going to mix in those body kicks. And I think by the fourth round, I really think he's going to have the timing on Deiveson Figueiredo. I'm going to say he's going to land a body kick, similar to what he did to Kai Kara-France, but this time in the fourth round, and he's going to finish Deiveson Figueiredo and leave no doubt about who is the best flyweight in the world. He's going to go from interim champion to now become the undisputed champion and probably send Figgy to the bantamweight division. I don't know how much success he's going to have there. But this is a fight that really, I debated about picking this via decision because both guys know each other so well. Both guys are going to have excellent game plans. And on top of that, I am worried because Brandon Moreno was training at Glory MMA with James Krause. In the middle of the camp, it's announced you can no longer train with James Krause. So he had to uproot his camp. Now he moved to Fortis MMA. And who knows how much that affected him in this camp. But I just think the age, the speed, looking back at the third fight, I just think he had the edge there. He dominated him in the second fight. And I just think Figgy's not getting any younger. He's not getting any faster. And I think Brandon Moreno is improving fight after fight. If you go back and watch Brandon Moreno in that first fight, and then you watch him in that Kai Kara-France fight, or you watch him in that third fight against Figgy, he is massively improved. So I think he goes out there in this fight. I think it's going to be a hard fight, first three rounds. I think it's going to be competitive. I think Brandon Moreno is just going to land a little bit better shots, a little bit more volume, a little bit more aggressive. I think he's going to mix in the takedowns. I think he's going to get a takedown here or there. He's not going to be able to control Figgy for long periods of time. Figgy will work his way back to his feet. And I think inevitably, as Figgy starts to slow down, maybe he has a bad weight cut for this fight as well. He'll start to slow down a little bit in the fourth round. And I think Brandon Moreno does not want to leave it in the hands of the judges. He knows how important a win in this fourth fight is. Otherwise, he may not get another title shot. So I really think he's going to turn up the pressure in that fourth round. And I think he's going to land a nasty body kick and finish off Deiveson Figueiredo to win the flyweight title. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.